hate pop music. So how did Chappell Roan win me over? I know that Good Luck Babe has captured the attention of literally everyone, but I haven't seen anyone go into depth about why from a technical perspective. And even still, as someone who only likes musical theater, usually I'm built different. And I want to make sure that you guys understand that I don't mean in a I'm not like the other girls and my taste is so much better than yours kind of way, but in a at 4 years old, adults used to tell me that I was an old soul, an old person reincarnated because instead of playing with the other kids or having the faintest curiosity about other children, I would always be hanging out with the nunnas and the ziyas. So my point is, I came out of the womb this way. As a professional musical theater performer and songwriter, I love finding new music because I want my life to have constant artistic enrichment. I want to broaden my horizons with all different music types. I want to find pop music that I like, but I just can't. Like, who would choose of their own free will to hate an entire genre when you gain nothing because you don't get to find new things to like, and you miss out on what all of your friends like and are listening to and talking about? I want to love things so I can be part of those conversations, but even though I have one-off pop songs that I like well enough, I never found artists that I loved. That was until Chappell Roan came along. What is different about this song from a technical standpoint when it comes to the rhyme, meter, lyrics, characterization, and instrumentation? What secret songwriting techniques are being utilized here that make it feel like actual witchcraft is going on? I'm going to explain what makes the song so popular and even what makes the song a pop masterpiece, but I'm also here to figure out why this happened to me specifically. If you have very picky music tastes, this may help you learn how to find songs that you will enjoy. But if you're interested in creating anything, whether it be your own songs or books or games, there is a vital lesson here that every creative person can learn from Chappell Roan's songwriting. Good day, everyone. It is Calxiyn here, ready to nerd out on Calxiyn Cares Too Much about something that I know that we all care about. Also, big thanks to my best friend Hunter for checking over the script. If you want to see us talk about Chappell Roan in a less fun but equally important context, you can check out our podcast. And just one more disclaimer before we get fully started, though. I have a feeling because of my strong pop music opinions, I'm gonna get people that are gonna try to, well, actually me, but me talking about what I think that Chappell Roan does well does not mean that I'm saying that your favorite pop artist girly does not do this. If you bring up other artists in a, well, this artist does this too, why don't you like the person I like kind of way, I'm just going to tell you that I have never heard their music, because that is probably the case. If you imagine while writing your YouTube comment that I isekai'd into your world from a Disney princess movie like Giselle from Enchanted, it'll make our lives a lot easier. However, that being said, if you write a comment saying, I think you will like this song because you like Chappell Roan, I would like to hear about that. However, my audience has been waiting for me to go into detail about my pop music hatred, so let's go forward with the knowledge that my beef does not apply to every song that has ever existed, but applies to a lot of songs that do exist, okay? Musical theater upholds clarity of storytelling above all else, and something that the head of our acting department at musical theater school said that stuck with me was that we go to the theater to see ordinary characters deal with extraordinary circumstances, and that characters are not above us, but they feel like instead that they could be us. Because musicals exist to tell a story, storytelling is always a requirement. Each song is crafted to contribute to the thesis of the show, and the specificity within the storytelling is used to reveal a more general truth about the human experience. A song in a musical feels like it is the tangible representation of a character's soul because it has orchestration and language in terms of the lyrics that is unique to them. Despite being written by the same composer, you would never get the Beast's leitmotif and Ariel's leitmotif confused, and this is why characters even from the same show have completely different ways of speaking despite having the same lyricists. The job of a composer and a lyricist is to disappear. It's to make you believe that the characters themselves are manifesting a song. If the lyricist, for example, has done their job right, there shouldn't be any quirks in the song that suit their personal way of speaking. It should be that every song genuinely feels like it is coming from a character. So my life starts with the incredible specificity of musical theater, and as I get older, I get exposed to pop music and it bores me to death. I can't tell these artists apart because their instrumentation sounds the same. The songs themselves feel repetitive and the lyrics are shallow and vapid, and it's borderline incestuous as a genre because everyone is just copying each other. And being formulaic is not a bug. Apparently, it's a feature. It's by design. My best friend Hunter told me about a band called the KLF, who wrote a book called The Manual, and the book is about how to have a #1 hit the easy way. So I read it over for this video. It was educational, if not a slightly distressing way to talk about art, but here's the TLDR in their eyes. A song needs to have an irresistible dance floor groove. Then they mentioned that the golden rule for a classic #1 single is intro, verse 1, chorus 1, verse 2, chorus 2, breakdown section, which I'm not entirely sure what they meant by that, by the way, a double chorus, and an outro. They go through what should be in the intro and the verses, and I would suggest reading the book if you want to get in the weeds about that, but at first I was like, by breakdown, do they mean a bridge? Is that what they're talking about? No, okay? Bridge. Don't even think about them. They are for the more musically mature. So a bridge, which is usually the turning point in every musical theater song, is apparently off the table here. They go on to say that the lyrics for the chorus must never deal with anything but the most basic of human emotions. Then they say, do not attempt writing chorus lyrics that deal in regret, jealousy, hatred, or any other negative emotion. These require a vocal performer of great depth to put it over well. And this was the part that got me. No records are bought in vast quantities because the lyrics are intellectually clever or deal in strange and new ideas. In fact, the lyrics can be quite meaningless in a literal sense, but still have great emotional pull. Now, this book is from the 80s, and obviously it's a little cynical, but are they wrong? Here's what I wrote in my script to go here before reading the book. In musical theater, songs are reactive, with sound being defined by the character as a whole, as well as the lyrics and music changing dynamically depending on what the character is singing about. For example, if a character is singing about being heroic, there may be heroic trumpets coming in. When a character gets an idea, it's a classic musical theater thing for a bell to ring, for some kind of ding to happen. You usually won't hear the exact same chorus lyrics twice, and if you do, there's always new instrumentation elements underneath it. Ursula from The Little Mermaid is a perfect example of utilizing reactive music. Poor Unfortunate Souls has almost one different element per line, incorporating slippery instrument slides when Ursula is being deceitful, or church-like music when she's trying to pretend that she's a saint.
Repented, seen the light, and made a switch to yes. And I help them. Yes, I do. But on the whole, I've been a saint.
The song goes through a 3-act structure, and there's this constant tension and high stakes, and that's something important for theater. Each scene in theater has a conflict where the characters are fighting for what they want, and the audience is watching to see who wins each mini argument. Remember, I wrote this before reading this book. In a pop song, maybe if we're lucky, after hearing the same chorus 3 times, they'll change one word in the lyrics, or we'll get a key change, or the singer will belt out a note that they just lightly glossed over before. The reason why I think that pop music is boring is not only because of the boring limited instrumentation, but because I don't feel like I've gone on a journey if we end pretty much exactly where we've started. You could dip out of a pop song at any time after the first chorus plays, because there will be no new musical or emotional information. How can I enjoy a medium where the lyrics can literally be meaningless when I come from a medium where the lyrics are the heart and soul of the character? So this book really validated my feelings about what pop music seeks out to be by how it hammered into the reader that lyrics should not deal with anything remotely complex, and to get a #1 hit, all you need is groove, or as we would say nowadays, vibes. Like a lot of songs are to dance to drive to party to, which is a utility purpose, and that's fine, but that's versus a song to think about, which is an artistic purpose to me. You can have both. There are thought-provoking songs in every genre. Musical theater does not have dominion over that. But a lot of pop artists don't care. Just like in that book, they did not care because that's not necessary for making money, and they literally admit it. If it's catchy, if people can dance to it, if it can be memed about on TikTok, if it's fun, if it makes you feel sexy or sad or happy or whatever it's supposed to do, that is enough. Even the most garbage lyrics won't matter. Any deep meaning is a bonus, but it's not required for a pop song to chart #1. Whereas musicals exist to tell a story, so storytelling is always required, not just an afterthought. That is the difference. The issue isn't that there is no good pop music. It's just that there is a lot of bad and shallow pop music because of that. Think about it this way. If you're a gamer, you may have heard that the Nintendo eShop allegedly is notorious for being filled with a lot of cheap, cash-grabby shovelware garbage. Does that mean that all indie games are bad? Of course not. It just means that making your own indie game has become a lot easier because of the internet, and quality control in the eShop is virtually non-existent. There is more pop music compared to 40 years ago, especially with people being able to songwrite entirely independently from the comfort of home if they have the skill to do so, and being able to release the song to the internet without like a music label or something like that. But there has just always been more pop music, period, compared to how many releases that musical theater fans would get. So it's not that all pop music is bad, it's just probability working against the entire genre. One last thing, and some of you may remember this story from my This Is the Thanks I Get video that I did. I have a distinct memory of having to sing a non-musical theater song as part of our curriculum at musical theater school. And so I picked a pop song that was complex musically and vocally and had a lot of reactive elements. And this song just really spoke to me, and I feel like it showcased how non-musical theater music can tell a compelling story. And we also had to submit an essay about it that is very similar to the lyrical analysis that I'll do on this channel. And one day when I hit 100,000 subscribers, I want to do a video on the song that I wrote apparently my teacher called it the PhD paper. Like it was like a grad school thesis. So I would like it to make a video on the song that I wrote the PhD paper about. And I had put a lot of effort into it. I put a lot of effort into dissecting each element thoroughly. But in his email with his feedback, he asked me if next time I could sing something that required a little less thought, because pop music is supposed to be fun. Now, as I said, I came out of the womb this way. One man's opinion did not influence my stance on the entire genre, but that mentality sums up why generally I don't like pop music and it does nothing for me. Because regardless of what you think, like you, the intellectual pop music girly that is typing out a comment about how your favorite artist that is not Chappell Roan is the greatest, most clever lyricist of all time and telling me how wrong I am, it doesn't change the fact that even if artists are trying to go against the grain, that a massive amount of people who like pop music like it because it's like junk food. If that's what people want, junk food content, that's what pop artists will make to secure the bag. And the problem that was identified by the KLF all the way back in the 80s has only become more true on places like TikTok, where we don't even need an entire song to be good anymore, but only 20 seconds of the song needs to be easily memeable and spreadable and viral and whatever. And this results in some especially disposable pop songs. It's supply and demand, and apparently people don't want to think. They just want to vibe. I think thinking is fun. That's why I have this channel. That's why that incident at school really disappointed me. Like, I wasn't angry, but I was just sad because, especially as creative people, is it not fun to dissect everything until there is no stone unturned and nothing left? Like, shouldn't we be able to have fun and find deep meaning in the stuff that we like? It's not like these things can't coexist. So now that my villain origin story is over, let's think about Chappell Roan. So I feel like even before talking about the song, we should talk about Chappell Roan as a performer. Her aesthetic and her energy is influenced by drag queens, and so her performing style as a result feels very theatrical. Drag queens are obviously connected to live theater, and so if drag queens equal theater, of course Chappell Roan would also feel very theater-core. All artists have a performing persona. What you're seeing right now is my performing persona, but that persona is still steeped in my everyday personality. We are presenting the best or most ideal version of ourselves as performers, but it's a self that could come out when we're not performing. Like, for example, if you saw me at an ice cream shop with my best friend Hunter and I was explaining to her the drama surrounding the Joker 2 musical press tour comment fiasco, it would probably be very similar to my demeanor in that video. How I talk to Hunter or my family about these musical theater things is pretty much how I talk to you guys. But even though generally, if you saw me in public, I would be more reserved and shy and not really say very much, and I would spend weeks trying to figure you out before I actually talk to you. You can manifest the Calxiyn cares too much out of me if you say the magic words. But with Chappell Roan, I don't know if you could summon Chappell Roan out of Kaylee. And Kaylee is her Peter Parker name to Chappell Roan being Spider-Man, if you didn't know. And it's not even about a stage name. It's that when she's in costume and she's performing, she's Chappell Roan, right? And you can play up the theatrics and do things that are entertaining when fictional characters do it, but if you did it in real life, you would just be an asshole, like the diva archetype. Wrestling and VTubers have kayfabe, and I feel like that this is on the same spectrum. It doesn't mean that she's fake or that her music doesn't come from her true feelings, but there's a difference between being on stage versus performing with gusto and playing up a character. So few people nowadays are performers who will perform, which means dancing and singing and acting every single song as hard as you would in a theater show, you know what I mean? It's difficult to do all three, but Chappell Roan does, and that really appeals to me. This connects to what I was saying earlier, but something else I found boring about pop songs in terms of having to perform them was the idea of, what am I supposed to do? And if you're a theater kid, you'll know what I'm talking about. I guess when you're on stage and you get to hold the microphone and run around, it's a little easier. But in a classroom, if you're singing a pop song, right, as you would a musical theater song in terms of really giving it when it comes to your acting and your body language, usually you're gonna be told to tone it down. And tone it down really means do nothing, and it's just so awkward to stand there and sing and make direct eye contact with people as you're again doing nothing. It's like film acting versus theater acting, and I have a distinct memory of submitting a self-tape for school. I think that we started film in term 3 and we had it all the way to term 6, right? So we had multiple semesters of this, and I really thought that finally, after 3 semesters, I had finally toned it down enough, right? I was just being myself instead of playing a character, and my film teacher said I was still doing too much. As myself, I was doing too much. I was really proud of it. I thought I finally understood it, but she said that I was doing too much as myself. And so for the next tape, I acted like a robot. I literally talked like this. I did not move my eyebrows or my hands at all or anything that I do naturally when I'm talking, and she said that it was perfect. And I am no longer overacting. I am actually being so authentic. Anyway, I loved her. She was a nice lady, but sometimes pop music just feels like in terms of concert training or how they train you for a concert, it feels like the film acting of the music world. Also, I'm not sorry that this video has so much bitching about school, by the way. I did benefit from getting a formal performing arts education, but it feels extremely relevant to why I'm a little cynical about certain things, and I feel like you guys need to know this. This is the information that colors my entire perspective, so I think it's kind of important. All that to say, though, Chappell Roan performs, and so that theatrical energy really resonates with me personally. But I've been recording for an hour, and we haven't even started to talk about the song yet, so let's talk about Good Luck Babe in of itself. In terms of the instrumentation, we start here with something that is clearly synth pop. More specifically, according to Hunter, a Kate Bush-esque 80s synth pop sound. You hear this bright tone in the instrumental before the lyrics start, but immediately when Chappell Roan starts singing, that brightness gets sucked away, and that's really interesting storytelling to me. You can imagine the protagonist is at a party and everyone is laughing and having a good time, but then protagonist gets stuck in their own head. We, as the audience, get sucked into the internal thoughts of the protagonist, and all the happy vibes fall away. We also have some interesting minor musical reactions going on here. After Cool and Truth, we have some sort of funky descending thing happening here that becomes very prominent after Fool. It's like an echo. You can interpret this any way you want, but I see this as an is it really echo? Like in terms of looking at things through a musical theater reactive element perspective, is it really cool? Is it really fine? I don't think so. Is the protagonist really the fool for being genuinely in love with someone, or is the love interest just too emotionally constipated to handle the protagonist living her life authentically? Then we have the claps, and I'm not the biggest fan of synthetic clapping or snapping in music, but I actually think that it works here because it's as if we're returning back to reality. We are inside the protagonist's head, and she's trying to tell herself, I'm overreacting, it's not that big of a deal. But as she returns to reality, the claps bring us to the striking realization of the conflict, of not wanting to call off this situationship, but the love interest not wanting to call it love. This is also where the violins start to come in, and that's where I went, hell yeah! Because giving me a violin is basically like giving a mouse a piece of cheese. Like, it's an easy way to trap me, even in cases where the rest of the song is bad. Which this one is not, but it has happened before. I'm a slut for the violin, like, what can I say? What's interesting about this song musically is that it is categorized as Baroque pop, which combines pop and rock music with elements of classical music, often incorporating layered harmonies, strings, and horns to achieve a majestic orchestral sound. So are you a theater kid with extremely particular music taste and you wonder how you can find a song that you like? Baroque pop may be right for you. So when we're talking about how I came out of the womb with elderly sensibilities, I feel like that this will appeal to people who like classical music like I do. I like a majestic orchestral sound, so immediately this is where I started to get sold. I also like the usage of the violins because of how they're used in order to evoke emotion here. Violins and strings tend to be used to evoke a sense of stress or tension, and this works perfectly for the conflict that we are introduced to here in the pre-chorus. But let's move on to the meter and structure for this section. Everything is nice and neat here, which is a little surprising because a lot of pop songs tend not to be. We do have this increase from 4 to 5 with this line here, but I don't actually mind this because this element stays consistent when we look at the other verse. I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but you can see that in this verse we go from 5 to 6, just like how earlier we went from 4 to 5. And I feel like that this is a good choice for the story because you can see how at the start it is very short and dismissive. But then when we see this verse again later, you see how the protagonist cannot let it go. Like, we start in this dismissive place. It's fine, right? Whatever. And then later on we grow because she's spiraling and letting her true emotions out instead of brushing it off with it's fine. Like, she's actually acknowledging her own feelings. And in a similar way, I love the growth here with the 7 to the 8 because it hits really hard. It's a twist of the knife. If it was the exact same, it wouldn't have that added oomph to it. Content dictates form, form follows function. All verses should match each other. But the problem in most pop songs, or even bad musical theater songs that we've talked about on this channel, if you look at all of these verses, is that there's no point to this other than the songwriter is not able to make the phrase the same syllable count as it was before because of their poor lyricism. And then everything feels like a stream of consciousness. Nothing feels like it's secure and it was done with any sort of intention. It's just like making it up as you go along singing in the shower, and you see this at its worst with Disney's Wish. So in terms of the rhymes here, we have cool and fool as perfect rhymes, while truth and sunroof are imperfect rhymes, allegedly. Okay, maybe it's because I pronounce my F's and TH's the same sometimes, so I don't notice. Like, I have a problem with things like earth, right? Like, as in the world, right? Earth, as opposed to earth. I don't know. Anyway, so maybe that's just a me problem, but I think depending on how this is sung, this could be a perfect rhyme too, you know? Anyway, in musical theater, of course, there is still discourse over imperfect rhyme usage, but in pop songs, it's perfectly acceptable. And I'm also not like a perfect rhyme purist to begin with, and so it doesn't bother me. Like, first of all, I have to acknowledge that, like, an apple is not an orange, right? This is a pop song, the imperfect rhymes are going to happen, but it also doesn't bother me in all pop songs either. I just don't like it when lyricists use them because they're being lazy and, like, it's too far of a leap to sound pleasant. As long as an imperfect rhyme is done well and it has intention, for me it's alright. And in this song, it's pretty seamless, even as we explore the other sections later. In terms of fun sounds, which includes alliteration, assonance, and some mysterious third things, we have specific pieces here which make these lyrics really sharp. Like nothing and no have a really strong impact. Like they have a similar sound, but they're also able to contrast in terms of meaning, which is very effective. Like there's just something so cutting about nothing compared to the no, as in we know this is not nothing. Knowledge is attaining something, and nothing is the absence of something. So I feel like that works really well. And another sharp sound happens with angel and arms as well. The one I really like here, though, is off and love, right? This works extremely well because we're emphasizing the vowel while also having the contrast of the words ending differently. Like off and love do not rhyme, but you have off, love, right? And we have that same sort of vowel shape there as we're singing. And so I feel like that the contrast makes the ending hit different. It feels like it's building on each other. I don't want to call it off, but you don't want to call it love, right? And so it feels like there's an increase. Off is so dismissive and it just fades away, whereas love hits us harder and the vowel sound is able to connect them. And this brings us into the lyrical meaning. And obviously, this is not a musical, but when we talk about why I would like something from the perspective of only really liking musicals, and why this gives me theater vibes, I feel like that's something we should talk about is that Sondheim famously said that all songs should sound like speech. If your character is super dramatic and hammy and can pull off being cartoony effectively, that cartoony anime speech is still as convincing as a character who is more grounded and realistic and human. There are two things that can make lyrics cringe. A lot of pop songs that I don't like have cringy phrasing because the lyricist can't figure out how to get the rhyme to work without butchering the English language, and it makes it sound inorganic. The no one has ever strung these words together in the history of the human race phenomenon, or as I like to call it, no one would fucking say that. For example, Asha throwing caution to every warning sign, or Magnifico saying, I let you live here for free, and I don't even charge you rent, is a no one has fucking said this, because it doesn't even make, like, grammatical sense, right? But there is something else that is a bit more nuanced compared to just the technical aspect of rhyming, right? Let's call this the they wouldn't fucking say that, as opposed to the no one would fucking say that. Here's another analogy, I guess, but have you guys ever seen those books with the touch her or die trope, but the man in question is like a curling player or something? That trope works in a fantasy setting where a king could say, behead someone for touching his wife, but when you have a character in the real world acting like that, you're like, bro, you aren't killing anyone. Like, let's just all settle down here. Some pop artists have lyrics like that, especially when they're making songs about how they were canceled or how they're entering like their villain era or whatever. And I'm like, you are not Lelouch v. Britannia. Where is he? You are not him. You are not Lelouch v. Britannia, okay? Your persona is not convincing enough to pull off these lyrics. And if you're a villain in real life, usually you're an unlikable asshole, right? Like a villain works in a fun story where everything's supposed to be entertaining, or again, wrestling VTubers, kayfabe. But in the real world, we don't like villainous people. We like people that are likable. So you can either be cringe because no one on earth has fucking said that, or you can be cringe because you wouldn't fucking say that. I do not believe you, but with this song, we immediately start with something that feels like what Sondheim said about speech. You could speak this entire song like a monologue, and for the most part, it just sounds like a conversation. I feel like you wouldn't even notice the rhymes. In terms of lyrical meaning, like I said, nothing and no has very nice contrast on that line, but I like the usage of fool, like that even feels very natural as well. In terms of the meaning of this line, I interpret this as the idea of a fleeting summer romance. And I don't drive, so I don't know, but just imagine the love interest is driving the car, right? But our protagonist is laughing as she literally stands up in the car and out of the sunroof, and like, you know, her secret lover girlfriend is like, get down from there, you'll hurt yourself, while she's still driving the car, and then they end up at the beach to like swim and lie in the sand and kiss and all that fun stuff. So when it says I'm the fool, the implication is I'm the fool with her arms out of the sunroof. Like, it's the protagonist doing this and talking about herself in the third person, not the love interest doing the angel arms. I think protagonist is doing the angel arms. And this is because the protagonist is being careless. Like, this relationship, it has the same carelessness as sticking your arms out of a moving car, presumably not wearing your, seatbelt or whatever, right? It's dangerous, but it's also like a summertime vibe. People are only putting the top down when it's good weather. And so to me, it's this idea of having fun and enjoying the feeling of something while you ignore the consequences. Because if another car crashed into you, you would go flying and die. And so I feel like that's pretty much the meaning of that one. And in the pre-chorus, again, we have great contrast here. Our protagonist doesn't want to call off the relationship, but the love interest doesn't want to acknowledge that the relationship is not a fling or a hookup, but actual love. And I really like, you only want to be the one that I call baby. You only want me as the protagonist to give you, the love interest, my love, because it feels good to be wanted as my baby. But what if I want someone to call me baby, right? You don't want to give me any love in return, because calling me a pet name would mean you, the love interest, you have to acknowledge your own queerness, and the love interest does not want to do that. That is the conflict of the song. So not only do we have instrumentation that I find personally interesting and lyrics that are thought-provoking, but we also have an introduction of the conflict. And to me, this is the difference between a song and then a song with a story. We are introduced to what the protagonist wants, what the love interest apparently wants, and the conflict that arises from this difference in feelings. That is the difference between theater and pop music, like I said earlier. In theater, every scene has a conflict. Every scene is about who will win, right? But this entire song is also about who will win. And okay, I want to do a video on this too. Let me know what you guys think. I have an unhinged idea to do Calxiyn's qualifications for musical theater core. Like, we all know what musical theater is, but what makes something musical theater core? And like earlier, I mentioned the Baroque pop sound, but like instrumentation isn't even the most important part. I think it's character POV in the sense of how we use characters to tell the story, how characters are designed to maximize the themes of a narrative versus just a narrative POV. Like a narrative POV may be, for example, a singer retelling a story where he went to a bar and he met a girl and they fell in love, and the hook of the song or the thesis is how fun this girl is and how much he loves her or whatever. Like, it's happy. That's a conflict-free anecdote. But a story is created for the purpose of a character to overcome a conflict. Like, if there's no conflict, there is no story. Singers sometimes create songs which sit in a stasis. Like, there are no conflicts, there are no stakes. Like, even the saddest breakup song may not have a conflict. Like, the conflict already happened, like the breakup. Now it's just about singing about how they feel and sort of being sat in that feeling. If you only sing about your feelings, like, that to me is an anecdote, you know? But if you're singing about whether or not you can get over the person that broke your heart or try to win them back, that's conflict. In theater, in every scene, characters are fighting for what they want, and they are implementing certain actions and tactics to try to achieve it. So in theater, we have super objective, that's what existed before the play even started. Like, this is kind of like, you could think of it as the character's like life goal or like their purpose, right? Then you have objective, which is a scene per scene basis of what they want. Then you have super tactics, which is sort of like an overview of everything they may try. So for example, a super tactic could just be like lying, like they are a liar. That is their super tactic, right? But then the tactic would be the individual lie, and then the action would be how they tell that lie and who they tell that lie to get their objective. Do you guys see what I'm saying? It's a bit hard to explain. Maybe that needs another video in a different video that is not about a pop song, but it's a constant struggle. That's why we want to see how the story ends. It's a constant struggle in seeing the cards being played and the tactics being played and how each character reacts to them and how they either conflict or complement their objectives. Like, who wins the argument here? How does this resolve, like, such diametrically opposed ideas? How are we solving this? Earlier I said you wouldn't fucking say that, I don't believe you, as like one of the things that can make lyrics cringe, but something else that can make a song be unbelievable is the vocal performance, and that's something that the band talked about in the manual, right? But I feel like what really helps with this is that Chappell Roan is really acting here when she sings it. Like, there's very intentional acting choices happening here that make it resonate more emotionally. Baby has this whine, has this yearning in it. There's how she holds no versus dismissively saying nothing. There's the contrast between the I don't want to call it off, but you don't want to call it love, and how it's growing with more pain and intensity. And we also have this fun vocal thing on one, like you only want to be the one. We have like a little flip thing, and I'll talk about this more later, but I think a lot of singers get lost in the sauce with making their vocals the absolute prettiest, right? When instead music is best performed when it conveys the most emotionally. And I feel like that Chappell Roan really understands this.
Say that we ain't nothing, but you know the truth. I don't wanna call it off, but you don't wanna call it love. You only wanna be the one that I call baby.
Which brings us to the chorus. And what I find so interesting about this is that the happy feeling here feels almost mocking, and this works perfectly for the lyrics. We also have the violin element still going strong back here, and that creates the underlying and darker tension compared to how upbeat and again happy the synth element feels. When we talk about the structure, everything looks good here. Similar to the verse, we have the grounded elements of the 9-9, and then that's contrasted with the growth in the 11 and 12. And of course, because this is a new element, it has its own structure. Choruses should be in a different structure compared to the verses that came before them because they serve a different function. In musicals, a verse is usually the exposition, whereas the chorus is more emotional. Like, think of Out There from Hunchback, where the backstory is in the verse of Quasimodo's entire life, but then we get the dream in the chorus. We get the I want of the I want song. Content, as in your writing and what you want to get across to your audience, dictates form, as in you synthesize your writing into lyrics and then you choose, does this belong in a verse or a chorus or a bridge? Form emerges in terms of the meter because of the function. Think about, again, Quasimodo has these very long lines explaining his entire backstory. I believe they are all like 10, 10, 10. And then you have Out There, living in the sun. Like, think about how short that is compared to the longer exposition. And so based on how much or how little you want to say and how that contrasts to each other, that will reflect the meter. And of course, in a chorus, in a pop song, we need a hook. And this is why we have this repeating element that does not happen in the verse. Since we don't have a lot of rhymes going on down here, my focus is mostly on the fun sounds. We have boys, bars, and that gives the line a pop, just like shoot, shut, stop, and these elements make everything more memorable. And we also have a little cheeky internal rhyme with say, way right here, which is very smooth and seamless. I also like stop and stupid being in roughly the same space for these respective lines because it makes stop the feelin', stupid reason feel like it rhymes more, like even though it's just a slant. Like, it helps with our memory because it's the phrase instead of just the ending rhyme. Like, you won't be singing along and be like, haha, something, something, something feelin', right? You'll remember stop the feelin', stupid reason, because it's packaged together. And there's also something twisty happening here with new excuse, right? The excuse, and that I always appreciate. In terms of rhymes, bars and R is imperfect, but we are in pop music land, so it's fine. And we have the same thing going on with reason and feelin', but I feel like that reason and feelin' is okay, because if she said feeling, right, like really put the ing at the end, like that would be more of a bigger problem, but because we kind of cut off that G, it's okay, it flows well. I also actually like the fact that the chorus doesn't have any perfect rhymes because I feel like it creates a bigger sense of dissatisfaction. And this is a brief musical theater discourse lesson that I've mentioned in other videos, but the reason why people are so against imperfect rhymes is because there is a belief that perfect rhymes create more satisfaction for the audience. It's like having sharp wit. Your jokes are funnier. You are more clever. It's more impactful, right, when you're going from one phrase to another and kind of punctuating it and sending it off when the rhyme is perfect. And I agree with this, but as I said, I'm not a perfect rhyme purist, because if that is the logic, shouldn't it also be true that if you don't want satisfaction, you shouldn't rhyme perfectly? That doesn't mean that there should never be imperfect rhymes. That means, by its own logic, there is a perfectly valid use case for when it's okay, even in musical theater purist land, for something to rhyme imperfectly or not to rhyme at all. I think the issue that most musical theater people don't realize is that they don't have beef with imperfect rhymes, they have beef with lyricists using them poorly, but they'd rather blanket ban them because no one uses it well, and so they think that the rhymes are the problem, but it's actually the lyricists that are the problem. But if it's to create suspension as opposed to release, as I said, the lyrics will hit when they're supposed to, because like we're on the edge of our seat, we're waiting for something that we hear as a more perfect rhyme, but then we don't have that. And I feel like Chappell Roan understands this principle really well, because it's not like we don't see perfect rhymes earlier, like obviously they exist, but think about the meaning of this course. Nothing is resolved here, so why would anything perfectly rhyme? Like, we don't come to a conclusion. We have this repetition of you'd have to stop the world just to stop the feeling, which like that is a super big theatrical dramatic line, by the way. Like, that's something that I expect in a classics text, is just in our modern day language, right? But the reason why that line never has its own rhyme is because why? The feeling doesn't stop, it just keeps going. The feeling will only resolve if the love interest character realizes that what she is feeling is love, and so again, we get no satisfaction, it just repeats. Which brings me very nicely into the lyrical meaning here. Kissing hundreds of boys will not change the unique feeling that the love interest character feels for our protagonist. She can drink to forget, she can say that she fools around with girls and that's just the way she is, that doesn't make her gay, but it's all excuses for her to ignore the feelings of romantic love she feels for the protagonist. And what I really like about this song is that it isn't vengeful, or at least it doesn't feel like an angry girlfriend song. It's literally like, well, good luck with that, because I went through the exact same thing before I came out, and guess what? You'd have to stop the world just to stop the feeling. Like, good fucking luck with that. It is a little petty and sarcastic. Like Hunter specifically said, this feels like the monologue you deliver to the closet case before they make the massive mistake of being with a man permanently. And I think that Hunter is right, but I don't think that it's petty and sarcastic in a mean way, and we ended up agreeing on that. It's more like the way that queer people talk to each other, and like, I can say it, I like women so I get the pass, right? But anyway, there's like a stereotype about this playful, catty abrasiveness, and like you see this on like Drag Race, you see this on Twitter, like even the viral TikTok right now with the very demure, very mindful lady and her saying like, here's your reality check, diva, like who should I make it out to? You know, like that's not mean, it's just attitude. We're not saying this in a way that puts someone down or hurts their feelings. The protagonist is being sarcastic because coddling the love interest won't help. Protagonist can't use kid gloves on her and dancing around all of the bullshit, right? Because that'll just get her suckered in deeper. The concern is genuine, and the protagonist knows that it will be catastrophic for the love interest if she ignores her queerness and runs off with a man. But the nicer attempts to get through to the love interest have probably failed at this point, and so she's just telling it how it is. On a lighter note, I know that this is never explicitly brought up, but I just think that it's almost ironic that luck rhymes with fuck. Like, I don't think that that was intentional at all. Like, it's almost subconscious, but like, the usage of luck and then the context of the song is gonna make you think that at one point, fuck will make an appearance, and like, it never gets there. I don't know, do you guys think anything about that? Like, that's the one thing where I'm not really sure, but it just occurred to me as I was listening to it. You're kind of waiting for maybe the chorus to change and then have like a swear word in there, because it draws your mind to it, because it's like, again, good fucking luck. Like, those are words that we string together anyway. And again, the feeling here comes through perfectly, because there's not just singing, there's also acting, and this is another qualification of my particular musical theater core type list, and why some songs can fulfill all the elements I already said but not feel very theater-y still. It's because singers are so focused on like 100% perfect or 100% impressive singing that they don't make any acting choices. You see this with a lot of people that have covered the song and they're missing the point. Like, I love the little scoff that happens on this "you" at the very beginning. It's like, are you serious? Like, LOL, you can try. And then we also have "the way you are" over here, and that's held slightly differently than the "boys in bars" phrase, despite those being the same phrase and the same vocal line. Like, she's really trying to hammer it in how important this life lesson is for the love interest. And this happens in the repetition as well, where it feels like every line here is sung slightly differently, despite being the same words. Like, they could have just copy and pasted like the same like take over and over again. But I feel like that there are very small nuances to them. Like, the first one feels almost like nostalgic for the feeling, but then the second one sounds a little bit more anguished, especially on the stop. And so make choices is the moral of this section. As my vocal teacher would say, choose your choice. But that's just the beginning of the song. As I said, with some pop songs, you start off pretty great, but after you hear the first chorus, you've basically heard it all. Like, this could crash and burn at any moment, so how does the rest of the song hold up? Instrumentally, we surprisingly get a change in the verse here. Something heavier is happening, but it also has that bright instrument that was used at the beginning and then mysteriously disappeared. Instead of dropping it completely, it stays this time. We also have a very clear musical reaction after "Cry" and "Fair" with the violins coming hard. Wait, hold on. We also have a very clear musical reaction with the slide on "Cry" and "Fair," and then the violins come in harder at "I Just Need a Little Lovin'." And this happens all the way to the end of the pre-chorus. We also have some sort of twinkly sound coming in as well, and just like, listen to this and tell me that this is not totally the same overly dramatic vibe that Ursula has. And then of course we have everything halting for just a moment before spiraling upwards in a really nice dramatic way. And this, to me, is how you should be reusing a verse and a pre-chorus. Like, it shouldn't be the exact same copy and paste. I think the reason why this feels so musical core is that it's actually changing based on what we just went through and what is being said by the protagonist. I wonder if the reason why we kept the brighter instrument here is because the protagonist is starting to embrace and be honest about what they want, yet the violin slides are to represent the tension that still exists because of the love interest. Like, the protagonist can be happy by themselves and by finally validating their own feelings, but when the love interest gets involved, that's when we're crying. That's when it's not fair. Like, it makes her feel doubt and things get tense and messy. Let's talk about the structure and meter for the lyrics, though. In regards to the form follows function thing, the verse here is not exactly structurally the same as verse 1, like how you may see in a musical theater song. Like I said, we have 5-6, before this was 4-5, I believe. However, it shares enough like genetic material with the first verse to reinforce that consistency and not make things a complete mess. What Chappell Roan does here, in my opinion, is that she implements a different rule, surprising yet inevitable. The reason why this syllable change or the other syllable changes don't feel messy is because what we heard before in terms of these lines of 13 still ground us. Like maybe if this line of 5 was 16 syllables, we'd have a problem, but it's just one step forward. It's not a massive leap up the stairs. We're just progressing a little bit compared to what we heard before. And again, these lyrics still have the same length as the ones that match previously from verse 1, as you can see here. You can tell that this was an intentional choice to create a sense of growth from the dismissive and simple, it's fine, it's cool, now it's I'm cliche. Who cares? And that has some nice alliteration on it as well. But like before it was dismissive and now it's I am in my feelings and my feelings are valid because of course I'm gonna feel emotional about this. Like we were literally in a situationship. I'm not the one in denial, you are. Like this is perfectly natural. Who wouldn't feel this way? Who wouldn't be upset? And then that is followed up with the idea of like, it's not fair that you're the one who's fucking around, but I'm the one who was honest and upfront and somehow I'm the one that always gets hurt. There's character growth in the idea that the protagonist thought it was all her fault at first, but now she's like, love interest, you have to take some responsibility for this, right? And that's what makes this feel appropriate. Like what you don't want is, again, something like Disney's Wish where every single verse is doing its own thing and it feels like that they just made it up in the shower. Like if you're going beyond having identical verses, nearly identical verses that have a structural change for a thematic reason is also okay. Like that is what you want. But I don't want to get into the lyrical meaning too soon, so back to the fun sounds. We got cliche, who cares, right? Little, lovin', off, love, like the last time. And another thing that is interesting here is the rhymes, because other than care with the S, we have multiple perfect rhymes in a row, right? I mean, I guess let's just count cares, right? Because again, pop music, whatever, sometimes they put the S's there. Cares, affair, fair, air. And this is an interesting change because the last verse that we saw had A-B rhyme structure, whereas this has an A rhyme structure. I've been annoyed at songs for changing the rhyme scheme before in the past, and so you guys may be wondering why I'm not like clocking this, but usually it's because it's mismatched compared to the emotional arc. In this song, when we go from what used to be one perfect rhyme set to one imperfect rhyme set to almost all perfect rhymes in a row, it feels like a representation of growth. If perfect rhymes create more satisfaction, this feels like the character is more sure in their decision and that emotional intensity is also growing. But in other songs where we start off with all perfect rhymes and like it's all A, and then suddenly when we hear the same thing again, it's A, and then some of the rhymes aren't even like perfect or whatever, like it seems like a downgrade. I think what some people have trouble wrapping their head around, even though I've literally like never said that any of these were hard rules, is that these rules do not exist in a vacuum. Like the idea of mechanical songwriting technique is always intertwined with the emotional content. Rules are guidelines, so when you make something, it doesn't feel like an unpleasant stream of consciousness, but the rules about structure can be broken when someone takes the structure they previously created and builds on it in a way that matches with the vocal line and the emotional arc of the song. What tends to happen with unskilled lyricists is that they're going from A-B to A just because they couldn't find any more good B rhymes anymore. Like A was the structure that they wanted all along, but in the first verse they just settled. And that sort of thing is always going to be clunky as opposed to making a choice, because we can usually tell when a lyricist has settled as opposed to this is something that we wanted to do on purpose. And that sort of inconsistency is just very telling most of the time. In terms of the lyrical meaning here, I touched on this a bit already, but I really like the change from I feel silly about how I felt, I'm gonna say it's fine, I'm gonna say I guess it was all my fault, like I'm just stupid, to now actually my feelings are real. You're the one who's not being real right now. And now talking about the pre-chorus, I love how this isn't just a copy and paste of what we heard before. The intense instrumentation serves how we've gone from I don't want to call it off to now think I'm gonna call it off. I do think after all of this, I am going to call it off. And then also, like, these are very far apart from each other, but I like gonna and then wanna, like in terms of how it happened before. Like it's another great fun sound contrast. I always love when a sound from the verse kind of rhymes with a sound that we hear in the second verse, but you don't immediately notice it until you compare both things together. And so I love that, like, nice little fun sound that makes it more memorable, because it's like, oh, I heard something that sounded similar to Gunna earlier. And it also, like, contrast the meaning, right? Because wanting to do something is different than I am going to do it. And so that's really nice. And like, again, in terms of the meaning behind this, I don't want to call it off to, I think I'm gonna call it off. I need to. I deserve better. We go from the implication that the secret lover girlfriend doesn't want to call it love to the idea that the girlfriend is only calling it love for the sake of keeping our protagonist around. Like, we went from the love interest character saying, I don't love you, we're just having fun, to like, wait, please don't leave. I do love you, I just don't want anyone to know about it. And our main character is saying, like, even if you call it love, like, you can call it love, but I know that that's not love. Like, I want to love someone who loves me in public. If you didn't love me before, you don't suddenly love me now, you just didn't want to lose me. Or maybe you did love me all along and you were denying it, but this is still a form of denial not to say it out loud. And like, I don't want to get too in the weeds about this because YouTube may not like it, but like, it sounds like the protagonist here is being used sexually by the love interest. Like, it's almost transactional in a way. And so instead of it being actually love, the love interest will just placate the protagonist by calling it love just to continue the sexual aspect. Like, if I say that I love you, can we still fuck, right? Because that's all the love interest is actually interested in. There's so much depth here, and it's only magnified by the acting. And this is what really strikes me about Chappell Roan, is like, I don't think that she's ever anxious or afraid of sounding bad. And like, let me be crystal clear, she never sounds like actually bad. But like, I can tell as a singer when another singer is afraid of being emotional because they are concerned that that's going to impact their ability to hit a note, compared to when a singer is so sure of themselves and their technique that they will allow, like, whatever comes out, like, that's gonna happen. You know, they will allow themselves to do a slide or a vocal thing to sound harsher because they're not afraid that harshness will like reflect poorly on their voice. Like, they know that they can have nice voice, but then also have nice acting. I can tell as a singer when another singer is afraid of being emotional because they're too concerned that they're going to impact their own ability to hit a note. Like, basically, they won't add any harshness because they're like, well, what if I do something that is harsh and then it sounds like that I didn't hit the note and then everyone is judging me on Twitter or something like that. Like, that kind of anxious mindset, compared to when a singer is so sure of themselves and their technique that they will allow themselves, like, whatever comes out, it comes out, because I know that if I truly feel and sit in these emotions, that the vocal technique and the acting can shine through together, that it won't be some sort of like poor reflection on my singing ability. Like, this sort of growl that she does on air, like, you would have other singers afraid to do that, but she's not afraid to infuse the acting into it because she knows that she can accomplish both. Again, like, are you singing or are you performing? Because what matters more is performing these emotions, not just singing about them and then trying to make us believe that you have them. Like, I believe her. Some of the people that have covered this song, I don't believe you. And now we're back to the chorus, and I can't really tell if there are any new instruments in here. Like, I think that the drums got heavier, and I think the violins are doing a couple fancy things. Like, I wouldn't call it trills. I don't play the violin, so like, I don't know, you guys, you tell me. But I think that the strings are actually harsher and more prominent anyway. And I do think that the singing is more intense, at least, even if we're kind of copying what we already heard before. Like, they didn't just reuse the vocals from the last chorus and copy and paste it here, which I appreciate. The chorus has returned with a lot of familiarity with the same lyrics, but it just seems more intense. It has some moments that build slightly differently compared to before. And now we're getting into the bridge, which, remember, the KLF said was only for the musically mature. And so this immediately makes the song a little different, right? But I love the violin takeover that's happening here in the bridge. Also, her inflection here sounds very like Mamma Mia-ish to me, which I appreciate because that's the only jukebox musical I like, but more on that another time. And we also have some musical reactions happening here after him and Night with the drums. We have the violins getting constantly tense and stressed all the way to the build of Told You So, and then they drop out for a moment before slowly coming back. There's a high-pitched string instrument descending and doing more subtle reactions while the lower strings are doing like the heavy building and the heavy tension. Like, it's just so good. In terms of the meter and the structure, a bridge can be whatever it wants. It doesn't need to match anything, so we're all good on that front. To talk about fun sounds and rhymes together as a unit here, what makes this bridge work so well is that you have these words that stick out that are very sharp, like when, wake, him, like the mi of middle, next, night, and it feels just very biting and sharp. And then you have heads, hands, nothing more, which also sort of connects to the idea of like stupid reason, stop the feeling as a phrase and like sort of a slant. Like we have middle of the night, nothing more than his wife. It's sort of flipped, right? Because here we have the M sound and then the N sound at the end, but then here we have the N sound first and then the M sound. And obviously, nigh, Y, like of wife, we have that I vowel, even though it's different. Like we have the nigh, right? And we don't exactly do the T. So it's not like night, it's more like nigh and then wife, right? But then the F of the wife has the prominence. And I just think that this is really great because I like the vowel connecting the two words, but I also like how nigh, we kind of like hold it until we get to the T, and that's as opposed to wife, where having that F and like saying that F is unavoidable, so it feels like that we've just built on something. If it was rhyming perfectly, we wouldn't have that. So I like night and wife for the contrast because it makes wife feel so much harsher. And then obviously in terms of what's going on over here, a go and so is a perfect rhyme. But in terms of the lyrical meaning, like, Jesus Christ, I actually wrote genius Christ in my script. I don't know how that happened, but like, this just makes me so feral. Like this idea that the girl that she is in love with, the love interest, will one day be nothing more than somebody else's wife. Like that's just so brutal, like real, but like also brutal, you know, like his wife feels so much more possessive instead of saying like, you know, we're partners, we're married. You know what I mean? Like you're not his partner. He doesn't see you as an equal, you're just his wife. Oh my God. He doesn't love you as a person, he loves you for what you provide in the role of a wife, like what society tells us a good wife should be. You know, you're playing the role of the wife. And also, Hunter chimed in while reading my script to tell me that Chappell Roan apparently wrote this song in like 15 minutes. And so in terms of what we said earlier about like songwriting and speech, I think that this is why this sounds so authentic. Like it feels like that these are things that were actually said during an argument, like it just happens to rhyme, and sometimes it doesn't even rhyme perfectly, like we said, right? And then the I told you so is where we get like this intense anguish, like just vocally, this is the part that makes me go, holy shit, every single time.
When you wake up next to him in the middle of the night, his wife face to face with I told you so. You know I hate to say I told you so. You know I hate to say, but I told you so. You can console with voice and voice.
People forget that the voice is an instrument, and that instrument is just as important as the violin. Like, it's not just the words that are being sung, but how they are being sung and how that melody complements everything else, right? And so how Chappell Roan sings the middle of the night, right, and the inflection that she has, and like separates face to face with such intentionality, even though she slides other phrases. Like, there's so many choices happening here. And I love how every I told you so is different. Like, it's so punctuated at first, and then it's like a little bit more quiet and gentle, and like she would really hate to say it because she does hope for the best for this girl, right? And so we have that, the first one, saying it the first time, then pulling back a little, right? And that pulling back helps it when we drive to 100%, because if you say them all at the same amount of energy, we don't go anywhere. So if we have 50%, I told you so, and then you know I'd hate to say it, I told you so, you know I'd hate to say it, I told you so, right? We're going all the way to 100%, and I think that that's just so good, such good choices, crazy vocalization on this last one. Oh my god. And like, again, it's that no one wants to see their loved one stuck in denial. Like, even if the breakup is still messy, you still care about the person. You want the best for them, right? And so it's not, again, petty ex-girlfriend. It's like, I told you so. Like, I'm trying to rescue you. Why are you not listening to me? Which brings us back to the chorus, and now here, I hear the violin mimicking the melody of Boys in Bars and Way You Are in our final chorus a lot more clearly, while the other strings don't follow that melody. Like, we kind of have two strings going on now. Like, we have kind of reaction strings, and then we have, like, tension building strings. And then in terms of Stop the Feeling, there's another musical reaction here, which I don't think was in the original chorus. And obviously, with how the song ends, it's very ominous, like, there's no resolution here, but even though the chorus is mostly the same, what stops it from being like, you could dip out of the pop song at any second and it doesn't matter because we don't go anywhere. We clearly went somewhere with like the haunting vocalization of I told you so in the background. It gives me actual chills. It contributes so much to the feeling like we went somewhere on this journey. This makes it seem like years later, the love interest character is hearing that ghostly, anguished voice in her head, like she's hearing the I told you so. It is haunting her interactions. And another way that you could interpret this that I just thought of is maybe after marrying the husband, she's like, I just don't love my husband. I'm gonna go find another man. Like maybe her and the husband get divorced, right? But then, right, she's doing the same thing that she was, and it's like, it's not that like you just don't love your man anymore. It's like you don't love men, bestie. What can we do about that? And like, this is gonna sound silly, but like, it's almost like the Christmas Carol, right? Like I feel like we've been through the ghost of Christmas past, present, and future, and like this is what this course is supposed to represent, the future, but before it was like, you know, a past, present sort of situation. Which brings us to the secret sauce that makes this song a masterpiece beyond everything that we've already discussed. And before I reveal it, I just want to thank all my patrons and YouTube membership members for supporting me. If you want to get early access to my content and allow me to keep creating content in the first place, please consider joining them. And if you want me to make a video about any song you want, you can actually check out my commissions over on Ko-fi and get me to talk this long about your own hyperfixation, and I will leave no stone unturned. I will be as thorough as I am in all my other videos about whatever song you want. I also have songwriting consulting commissions where you can send me your own song and I can provide you insight on how to improve it, kind of more like Welcome to Roses or Happy Day in Hell, because we didn't really fix or rewrite anything here because this song's already good, but I will also outline the good, like I did with this song. So think about it like getting your own video, but like for your own personal use for your own song, so I can help you with your songwriting. And without further ado, let's reveal the big secret of this song. As I said, it's very important to me that a song takes you on a journey. But what's so interesting here is that we have a satisfying story arc, but it's not even because we know what the love interest will choose to do. The satisfaction for the story arc doesn't even come from a will they, won't they. Like, I guess in regards to the story arc for the love interest, you could take a dark interpretation and think the love interest ended her life. Since we have that distorted, you'd have to stop the world just to stop the feeling, implying that the only reason the song ended wasn't because she was successful at stopping the world, like that's impossible, but rather she was successful at stopping the feeling, which is very sad, like the feeling only stopped when she died. But you could also imagine the love interest was having a dream and woke up deciding they weren't going to live in denial anymore. Like, I don't think that this is like the Skater Boy type song where it was, you know, 5 years from now, you live at home feeding the baby, you're all alone, or whatever the lyric is. Like, I don't think that through the progression or the story of the song that the love interest actually has a husband. I think that that was just a future hypothetical of where her life is going to end up based on the behavior and the actions that she's doing right now. Again, like, gay Christmas Carol. That's basically what this song is. Like, you know, when this happens to you, someday in the future, you're going to look back and regret it. Maybe the love interest was successful at stopping the feeling, and the feeling went away because the protagonist left the love interest. Like, the love interest fell out of love. She doesn't love the protagonist anymore, and then therefore she's like, oh, well, you know, I don't love women because I was in love with this person and now they're gone. But the implication is that the love interest will one day find another woman and it'll just start all over again. I think you can interpret the ending in a lot of different ways. But I think where the satisfaction comes from is not from whatever ending is in the love interest's story, it's from our protagonist standing up for herself and what she wants, and finally being honest about her feelings compared to the it's fine, it's cool place that we started. That's the secret sauce of this song. It's not just that we have a story arc, but we have a character arc. We have a hero's journey circle for this character. Like, on the surface, this song is incredibly relatable for so many queer women, queer people in general, who have been in this exact same situation. But you would think if that was the case, like, where are all these straight people coming from? Clearly, there's another element that people are relating to. That's what I think the secret sauce is for this song. You have a story that is relatable to so many queer people, especially queer women, but you have a sentiment that is relatable to everyone. What musical theater does is it has a specific premise, but a human core that everyone can relate to. Like, you may not have literally been locked in a tower, but you relate to Quasimodo wanting to belong somewhere and be accepted because that's something that we all want. Chappell Roan made sure to define the specific experience that she has gone through as a queer woman, but also identified the core human experience, exactly like how a musical theater song would. Going back to Quasimodo or even Rapunzel, if you were abused by your parents in a very similar way, you may relate to that specificity, but everyone relates to that sense of belonging, to wanting to follow your dreams, freedom, and all of those things, like finding a place where you find the people that you belong with. So when you think about the general story here that everyone can relate to, it's not really about the relationship, even though the relationship is the center of the conflict. To me, what we see in Good Luck Babe is someone finding their own self-worth, like going from being passive about what they want to finally asserting it in this pre-chorus and then telling it like it is in the bridge. Like, it's confidence. I think that's the problem with pop songs sometimes, is that they're either so specific that they are unrelatable for the average person, kind of like when a singer's talking about getting canceled and like their villain arc and all of that stuff that I talked about earlier. I don't know, maybe if you're going through your own villain arc or something, you might relate to that, but it's a very specific thing, and like you can tell a song is just like for the stans, like for the people that already like that singer. No one else is really gonna find relatability in that. But then on the opposite end, you have pop artists that are like, I love your blue, green, gray eyes, right? And like that sort of trope, and making it so generic that it appeals to everyone. I think the difference between pop songs and musical theater is that pop songs have like a self-insert-y element to it, whereas a musical theater song will be like, here's a character, you're not exactly like them, but you share something, right? You share a core feeling with each other. Like, you may be different in all these other ways, but again, there's a general moral for every human being to relate to. And again, a lot of pop songs don't do both very well, because telling a specific story as a vessel for a general moral that every human being will relate to, that isn't a music technique. That's a storytelling technique, and not all songwriters or pop artists are storytellers in that way. Queerness is at the center of the conflict, but the journey the main character of the song goes on is something that we all relate to and understand. We have all minimized our own feelings and told someone that their behavior was fine when it really wasn't. We have wondered if we should settle for someone who doesn't truly love us because otherwise we will end up alone, or if we should cut it off and try to have better. We have had trouble cutting people off and asserting our boundaries, because seldom are people as cartoonishly evil and heartless as they are in some fiction. More often than not, the person we love is not a bad person, they just aren't a healthy person for us to be around at this moment. They aren't malicious, it's just that their lack of acceptance of themselves is harming our ability to embrace our own identity. We have all been around someone in our life who is embarrassed of us because we are secure in who we are in a way that the other person wants to be, but can't. Like, whether it's in a romantic sense or a friend that like won't admit that they're friends with you around their cooler friends. Like, if you ever had a friend that was like, they like anime or theater or something, but they're embarrassed about it, and then that ends up extending to them being embarrassed of you when like you talk in public, or they're like, oh, like that's stupid, let's not talk talk about that, like, at the lunch table. No one cares about that, but it's like, but you cared about that when we were talking over Discord. Now suddenly we're at school and we can't talk about musical theater anymore because you're afraid that your cooler friends are gonna say that you're a nerd. Like, you'll understand. Also, this didn't happen to me because I didn't have any friends in high school, but I'm just using that as an example. The love interest is embarrassed of the protagonist because the protagonist is a constant reminder of what the love interest is embarrassed about in herself. The feeling of being an outcast versus conforming and going along with the status quo is intertwined with queerness, which is why a lot of people see queerness in the Disney underdogs, but it's something that we will all feel at some point. Do we dim our own light because people will be embarrassed if we draw attention to ourselves? Or do we shine bright and suffer the loneliness in the short term? Is cutting the people off that don't value you to find where you really belong worth it in the long run? Even if you think that at the end of the journey, like, what if you don't find that place? Is it worth the risk? You have to have faith that there's a place for you out there. Otherwise, you're cutting everyone off and will end up alone. At the same time, maybe ending up alone is actually better than being around people that won't let you be yourself because they are too afraid of being themselves. In this song, we see a protagonist who fights for better because they know that they are worthy of love, and they hope that one day the love interest will know that she should treat herself better too, encouraging her to accept herself because this feeling will never go away. The song never says be with me over him. It says be yourself over pretending. Be yourself instead of someone else. And maybe by the end of the song, the idea that for everyone listening, like, we're the love interests in our own lives. We're the person that needs to decide. We are constantly faced with these decisions. It's not something that's like one and done. When it comes to our identity, we're always sort of like measuring like the risk versus reward in terms of being our true selves. It's something that we're always going to struggle with. And that's what I think makes this song a masterpiece. There is the narrative here, the specific narrative in the love story, but there's like a secret narrative in here too, and the moral is something that everyone can relate to. It's not a bitter song about hating an ex because they've run off with someone else. It's not putting anybody down. It's encouraging everyone to accept themselves and the desperation of wanting to get through to the people that you love to also accept themselves before it's too late. But as aspiring songwriters, what does it actually take to reach this point? If you want to hear the story about a song that struggled with creating a core emotional thesis and the plot specificity despite it being in a musical, you can check out my video on how these demos from Tangled for Rapunzel's I Want song were doomed to fail and how they eventually succeeded. Usually I would redirect you to a similar video, but since this is my first pop song video, I don't actually have another pop song to send you over to. Maybe by the time you're watching this, I will, yes. But if you're interested in songwriting, I can't stress how valuable and rare it is to see demos and works in progress. And that's why I think that you should check out the Tangled one. It can just tell us so much about how to revise our work to be as compelling as someone like Chappell Roan. So this has been Calxiyn caring way too much. I'm glad you all care too, and I will see you next time. Bye!